abundantly.
Health of our society, the future and health of our homes depends largely on how we do what God expects us to do.
Join Dr. Claudius Davis on the Full and Abundant Life program here on WeFM 99.9, Wednesdays 9 to 10 p.m., as he explores the elements that might be robbing you and keeping you from realizing your full potential. It is time to break those chains of bondage. It is time to shake off what's been holding you back. The Full and Abundant Life program, 9 to 10 p.m., every Wednesday on WeFM 99.9 with Dr. Claudius Davis.
Lord, keeps.
We've got just 1 minute after 9 o'clock. Wednesday, the Grenadines and across the rest of the Eastern Caribbean.
Jesus.
It is now time for us to present to you this evening's Full and Abundant Life radio program hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. He's back with us another Wednesday here on WeFM. And to be a part of this evening's program, because this program is an interactive program, you can call 4579997. That's 4579997. You can send us a WhatsApp text or place a WhatsApp call, or you can follow along on WeFM's Facebook page to be a part of the Full and Abundant Life radio program right here on WeFM 99.9. So without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome once again.
And good night to you, sir. It's certainly a privilege to be here again. I certainly was enjoying the program that just ended, and it reminded me of so many, many things. And as you get older, obviously, much of that becomes much more pronounced.
Oh, yeah.
And it becomes so much a reality. So such an awesome program. And so tonight, I want to continue our discussion about change and looking at, the behavior and the agent of change, because obviously if we're going to improve the quality of our lives, and that's what the program that just ended a while ago was really talking about, some of the choices that we do make and need to make that certainly can have tremendous impact on our lives. And they're not always positive, but some of them are rather negative and lasting. And so I really wanted to continue our discussion tonight on the theme of looking at behavior and how we change the behavior. And of course, part of that is to really be honest with ourselves and to spend some quality time assessing, not just that the gas price is increasing and who is in government and what they're saying, not saying, and doing it, but to spend some quality time looking at, the quality of our lives. And obviously the speaker, Dr. Thompson, he said today he attended a funeral of someone who was 103, and he was talking about, things we need to change in our lives. I was kind of smiling, here's someone who has lived 103, and obviously she must have done a lot of correct things in terms of being able to preserve and be able to live out her life, because the good book says, we only have about 70, 75, but she went way over, past 30 years beyond that. And obviously that person must have been doing some awesome things in terms of, being health conscious, I would assume, but sometimes, working and living in the Caribbean and enjoying the natural things, sometimes in of itself can help to improve the quality of one's life. And so I want to talk about, the infection of the brain in terms of, not necessarily in terms of the physical body, the viruses and the various ways that they do attack our physical body, but I want to focus more on the some of the behaviors that do have significant impact on our lives, that we have allowed our lives, our character, and our personalities to be shaped by those toxic ideas. And sometimes, they have their roots, of course, early in our upbringing, in our homes, our parents, and so on. And I may even be lack of parents, wherever we got them, they nonetheless have long-term effects in terms of our lives. So I wanted to talk about, some of those, viruses that in way of information that we have accumulated over time that has shaped our personality and our character. And some of these, once they're internalized and become a part of who we are, can have long-term effects. And not only long-term effects, but it can become to where they become very difficult for us to alter or to change. And sometimes we're not even aware, that conscious of some of those bad information that we have internalized. And part of that is because we are too busy making a life and forgetting about cultivating a healthy life. Jesus said, I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. So tonight, I really want us to begin to be honest with ourselves, to be able to step away from our religious traditions, to step away from, some of these philosophies and ideas that we sometimes follow along with that may not always be in our best interest. But I think at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility for our lives. And until we do that, I don't think we're going to be able to improve the quality of our lives. And as a therapist or clinician, one of the things that I do work with daily is to help people to begin to take some responsibility for the decisions and the choices that they have made. And we have a tendency to project our failures onto others and blame others. But I think at the end of the day, we have to begin to take responsibility. And part of that taking of responsibility is to begin to not so much to look back as it is to begin to ask the tough question, where am I right now? Am I content? Am I satisfied with who I am right now as I attempt to define who I am now, not what I will be tomorrow or not what has happened yesterday, but to define where I am. It's like looking at your financial situation. I mean, you can sit at the kitchen table and you can look at, your expenses, and you can look at your income. And sometimes when you don't want to look at it, and sometimes it is so depressing that we just ignore it altogether. But ignoring the situation doesn't fix it. What I'm saying to us, we have to eventually come up with a plan. How am I going to fix this deficit in my life? How am I going to be able to live within what my income is? And sometimes you may have to cut back, or you may have to get an extra job. Maybe one job won't cut it. Maybe you may have to have an extra job. Whatever you need to do, you have to decide to make a decision in the here and now. This is what I'm going to do right now. My current income isn't enough to cover my expenses. So I'm going to have to decide either to cut back, or I'm going to have to try to get another job, whatever I have to do. Now, that's on the financial front. So I want us to use that illustration when it comes to our character, our life, our sense of happiness, our joy, what makes us happy. How do I feel today? What's the problem? Why am I so depressed today? Why am I so anxious today? Why is it I feel so empty in my life? Why do I feel like my life is of no value? Why do I sometimes feel like, a sense of hopelessness? My life becomes meaningless. Today, what is triggering that? What is it that I need to take responsibility for in order to change? And I'm saying part of that begins with the way you are thinking. with the way how you see yourself, how you experience yourself. And I'm saying that you can change that today. The whole premise of New Testament Christianity, I shouldn't say New Testament Christianity, but the whole premise of Jesus coming into our world was to bring us into the present, to say, hey, look, this is who you are, and this is why I am here. I am here to partnership with you to help you to reconstruct today a new life. You can be a new person today, and I am willing to work with you. I will take up residency in you. I will join in partnership with you, and I will help you to begin to get on this path of the full and abundant life. That is what Christianity is about. Christianity is not about, going to this assembly, this building and on a Sunday and Saturday and with all dress up and, feeling good. No. Christianity is about the change, the transformation, looking at your life. And you don't need to go to a particular location on a Sunday or Saturday in order to do that. Right now, where you are, you can sit and you can answer the tough question. Am I satisfied with the direction of my life? Am I satisfied right now with who I am, what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling? And then, whatever the answer is, you need to then ask the next question. What is it I need to celebrate that I feel good about? And what is it that I need to change right now? And I am saying to you that this is something you don't need to do alone, that God has sent his Son into the world. He has sent his Holy Spirit so that you can enter into partnership with him and begin a new life. And I think that is what Jesus was referencing when he confronted Nicodemus. And he said, look, you need to be born again. And I think when Jesus made that statement, he wasn't thinking about the future. He was thinking about a present reality. You can transform, you can change right now, but it is your decision. Notice he didn't say, I will change you now. He says, look, you must be born. You have to enter into partnership with me. And that is what we think it is. But I think sometimes we think, we can enter into partnership with the priest, with the pastor, with the reverend, with the president, or with the prime minister, and we can enter into and we can change our lives. No, those kinds of relationships may put some money in your bank, it may give you a job, it may do all those kinds of things for you. It may even give you duty free. You might be able to bring in whatever it is duty free. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the quality of your life, how you can begin to enjoy the full and abundant life, and how, as a result of your enjoyment, as a result of your fulfillment, you can now infect those people that are dear to you, those people that are closest to you in your life, which is your children, your grandchildren, your spouses. You can begin to start from that place and begin to move out into the larger community. But it must start with you tonight. That's where we must certainly begin our discussion as we begin to interact. So, I think your brain is involved in everything that you do and everything that you are. That's where it begins. And I think that's where the other program that just ended a while ago was really talking about, some of the things that we can do to live a healthier life. Of course, he was speaking from a medical doctor's point of view, from a biological and chemical point of view, some of the chemical things we put into our bodies, how we can impact the brain, the neurons, and have certain effects, whether it be cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever. So those are where he was at. But I'm also saying that there is even other things we can do to enrich our spiritual life and how we can keep that spiritual life healthy. And I think the Holy Scriptures have been very, very careful in walking us how we can begin to do that. One is, of course, through prayer daily scripture reading, associating with the Christian fellowship, the koinonia, with people who are positive, who are heading in the same direction that you're heading. You can form bonds with that to enhance. So all of that, I think, in essence. So, but I think it begins with the choices that you are called upon to make. And it all starts with, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with other people. All of that are decisions that are being made in the brain. And so we have to begin to look at it from that standpoint. So your brain, I think, is the organ behind your intelligence, your character, your personality, and every single decision that you make. It's all up there. Even the person you've chosen as a spouse, where you choose to live, every major decision in your life is being made. But of course, some of those decisions are pre-programmed, obviously. And I think that's what Jesus was referencing when he talks about you must be born again, because he understands that, you've been socialized culturally a certain way. It takes time. And I think that's what he was referencing when he said to Peter, when you're converted, I want you to go and help others as well. Because he knew that culturally, we're being socialized a certain way, and our culture do have an impact on us over time. How we see ourselves, how we experience ourselves, how we see others, how we experience other people. And it is still a problem to this very day. And sometimes I get discouraged myself when I see that we have not really changed. And I see the same mentality. Yes, we may celebrate our independence, we may celebrate our freedom, but when you look and you see the way the decision that we've made, we have now, we may have gotten away from institutionalized slavery and oppression and all of that stuff. But now we are involving in enslaving ourselves. When I see so many of our young people are incarcerated because of drugs, because of some of the things that they're involved in, those are decisions that they have made. That now they're going to have, I got a call just recently, actually a card, from someone, thanking me for working with them, but when I look at this situation, you're thanking me, yes, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, you're looking at 50 years, incarcerated 50 years of your life, and you're talking with someone who's in their 20s. So by time that person is released, or if they live that long, I'll be dead and gone, because you're talking 50 years from now. I don't think I'll be around 50 years from now. I'll be gone. So what we're talking about the decisions that people make every day. And some of those decisions turn out to be great, awesome, wonderful. But some of those decisions are really, is then a form of enslavement. Even marriages, where people have been married for 30 years and 40 years, and it's a hell. It's an imprisonment. They have separate bedrooms. They don't talk. It's a business arrangement. And you talk about 50 years together or 30 years together. But that wasn't the original intention. When that wedding day, the preacher said, I now pronounce you man and wife, it was an exciting moment for the audience, for everybody else. But here we are 30 years later, 40 years later. And that whole process has changed itself into a form of bondage, if you want. Maybe that's a strong term. But what has happened is that the decisions that we make sometimes can have long-lasting effects. And this is a hard lesson, I think, for us to be able to communicate to our young people, to be able to communicate to our children. And I'm saying to us that the best way for us to be able to communicate those strong values and those strong messages to our children is not so much from the pulpit and preaching at them, as it is modeling to them what it truly means to be a true human, the way that God engineered and designed you to be. So I think it's more of a modeling and how we do that. with our children and how we model to each other. And I think that's what John was talking about. He talks about the Christian community, the fellowship. When we come together, we pray together, we edify each other. Paul used the word edify. John used the word fellowship. When we come together, how we build each other up, we share. And I think it was Jesus himself who puts it well, where he says, where two or three are gathered together, being led by the Holy Spirit, come together, that I am there to bless you. If you ask for anything, if you symphonize and it becomes very beautiful, harmonized together, I am there to bless. And when that happens, there is always the windows of heaven opened with showers of blessings. I think it was Ezekiel who paints that image of where the windows of heaven opened and there shall be showers of blessings. And I think in our homes, if we make the right decision in our selection of our spouses, the way we raise our children, I'm saying to us that there will always be showers of blessings of God's grace and his love as we reflect it back and to each other in our family system. Whatever you've received from God, you model it back, and that's what makes the home so beautiful. That's what makes our children feel secure, where they can begin to build strong self-esteem, sense of self-efficacy, to now understand that they're valuable, but that they can do whatever talent that they have. They don't have to be failures. They don't have to feel like they're less than, that they are inferior. But we have to break that bondage. We have to begin to celebrate. Jesus said, I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And it doesn't matter what your history may have been. It doesn't matter what your color would be, what part of the world that you're from. Jesus died for all of humanity to liberate, so you can break those chains. Whatever chain you've wrapped around yourself, that you've attached yourself to, I'm saying to you that those chains can be broken. But it starts with your thinking. It starts with your belief system. And you may have to do some radical changes about that. You may have to begin to spend some time looking at what you believe. I was talking to someone just this week. A lady was telling me how all men are, and she was quoting the old famous phrase, all men are dog, I don't trust any of them. No. I'm like, well, where have you traveled outside the United States? No. You don't have a passport, you've never traveled. But how do you know what the men in Australia? Have you met in St. Vincent and Barbados and the Caribbean and China? How can you make this decision? And that's part of the problem, isn't it? That we have taken bits of information, we've stored that bits of information in our brain, and now we filter everything through that bits of information. And now all men are no good, because you may have experienced one male person, maybe a dad or whoever it is, that may have turned out to be horrible. And as a result of that, now you've used that bit of information that's stored in your brain to now filter all other male person through that one filter. And it always comes out the same way. And so part of what I try to do, and what I'm encouraging you to do as well, is to begin to get people to look at their belief system and to understand how deeply rooted that belief system is and where did it come from. And then ask, do you want to change that belief system? And how long will it take you to change that belief system? Can we now work on that? Let me give you some homework. These are some of the things that I think you can do right now, so that we can begin to, when I see you next week, we can begin to make some assessment in terms of changing that little filter, that little thing that you have that says all male or bad and no good and unreliable, can never be trusted. How can we begin to, where did that come from? Let's go and find it. Let's look for the root of it. Once you find the root of it, let's see what we can now plant. Let's pluck that up and let's see if we can plant something And when we start thinking about that, you have to ask yourself, Psalm says that we are wonderfully and marvelously made. So the question then becomes, is just a female that God, they all female are wonderfully made? Are we talking about both genders? And if the answer is both gender, then there has to be a man out there for you that is good and that will treat you well. And there's a female out there that is good and will treat you well as well. Because you can't use that old formula that you have. So we have to begin to rebuild. And life is a rebuilding process. And quite unfortunately, I think we turn this into a 30-minute sermon and a Sunday where this preacher person thinks that he is whatever it is, and he's going to change life with his 30 minutes, and he sits up there and dance, and everybody's watching the back of everybody's head, and then they end and shake hand and tell him how wonderful a lift sermon it was. But it did nothing for the people, because people can only change when they identify those belief systems. And some of those belief systems are so deeply rooted that they become unconscious. You operate from that. You're not even conscious of it. And you may find yourself saying amen to something that, one time I asked a lady, I said, what gender was Jesus? I said, male. What do you think? I said, well, you said all men. Is he excluded from that? You follow? What are we talking about here? So what I'm saying to us is we have to begin to look at how we begin to, these little things that's in our brain, we have to begin to identify them. Someone sent me a clipping of a lady, which I listened to it several times. It talks about growing up in a particular traditional church, and she shared the story of how she was, in her as a white person, how her grandparents, she spoke of one time a black man entered into their congregation, and how people were essentially rejecting this person and said, no, you need to go elsewhere, you can't be here. And her grandparents actually said, you can sit with us. And that black person sat with them. And the story is, what she was saying is how her parents, whenever there was an issue of racism that would come up, they would always say, well, grandpa, we're not like that, because and they always go back to the grandpa story. But in essence, the lady was saying, but we never address our silence. We always go back to the grandpa story to talk about how grandpa asked this black person to sit in where they were sitting with them and make them feel good. So they use that story. But the point is, they never themselves actually spoke up when it came to a situation where there were racist attitude. And sometimes our silence can become even more pronounced and become the thing that very betray us. And so I really want to thank you for sending me that story, because it tells me, even today in our time, we sometimes, because of old habits that are so deeply rooted, we take the path of silence. And this lady was a member of the Church of Christ and grew up in the Church of Christ. And this is a period where, blacks were not allowed in white churches. But even to this day, you have black churches of Christ and you have white churches of Christ. They still exist, but and they're going to have fellowship, but there's a silence. And this lady is simply saying that silence is even more dangerous than if we were to verbalize. Because when you verbalize it, now we can fix it because we're taking ownership and we can do some correction. But silence can even be more devastating than anything else. So let me go back and look at some of the comments that we have here. Manette says, good evening. I just wanted to ask some question. How do you handle a family member who disrespect your child, argues with you about it, and let their own child join in to attack you while you, and then I can't see the rest of the stuff. Let me see if I can do that. While you stay quiet because you weren't raised right. So again, and I'm glad you see this. Sometimes I think we think that silence is somehow a form of humility, and that there is something gracious about that. But silence might well be an indicator of your own weakness, of your own indifference. And yes, I don't think you should allow anyone to disrespect your children. I just think you need to find a very healthy way to address that, because remember, children internalized how they feel. So you as an adult, you might be able to defend yourself, but you got to think about the scarring effect that is going to have on a child when you disrespect the child. And we see this all the time. We call our children stupid, idiots, and all kinds of stuff. And then we expect them. Where do you think that information goes? And I'm saying to us that information goes to the brain. It gets stored there. And then that becomes the filter for their sense of self-esteem, how they see themselves. And sometimes that may come out instead of being dependent and always trying to satisfy and please other people, it may come out another way where there's a rage and anger. As a matter of fact, I saw just a lady today, and she was a doc. Look, I can't sleep, and look, I just feel like I'm angry all the time. I feel like tearing the stuff down, beating people down, and I need some medication. I'm afraid. I don't want to get into trouble. And so when you go back and you peel this person back, and you go back and you see the traumas and the things that has happened to these people, you begin to understand the severity of what has happened. This is a person who has been sexually traumatized in her life. She's basically obese now. I mean, so everything about her has been shaped from all of the horrible things. But what I'm saying to us, yes, they happen, but they are now stored in her brain to where now everything is filled to her sense of identity, how she experienced herself. All of that is there. It is now, but she's not even conscious. She was trying to, angry. She is. It's when I start peeling back now and start talking. Well, where's the source of this anger? Where is it coming from? Tell me about your story. Tell me about your narrative. What was it like for you in the middle school? What was it like for you in the elementary school? So as you begin to unpeel, you begin to see, that's where it is. But the question as a therapist now is, how do I get this person to now begin to uproot some of those things that are stored there and begin to repact? That calls for a relationship. And in this relationship, that's why as clinicians and leaders, we ought to be extremely careful. Because once we begin to uproot and begin to plant, it means now the person is going to now solely depend on you. And when that happens, it can be led down some dark alleys. That's why you have such abuse among ministers who abuse people, and therapists and other people who take advantage of people, politicians who people come to trust and respect, can be easily victimized. Because once you do that, people are looking for something that is larger than themselves, something that they can trust, something that they can hold on to. And in order for them to do that, in order for them to begin to heal and to recover, they must first develop trust, and then they have to become vulnerable. That's why Jesus was smart enough to say, unless you be converted, become as a child. And once you go through that process where you're becoming a child, it means you're also opening up yourself to be vulnerable. And what that means is you got to have leaders who are people of character and integrity, so that they will not further use their weakness to victimize. I mean, that's one of the tragedy that has happened in the Catholic Church. And I want to say not just the Catholic Church, but many of within my own tradition, where I have seen, ministers who families trust them with their children, with their daughters, to be able to take them to camp and be able to, because they're busy. And one of these preachers were taking these girls to hotels and having sex with them. And these girls were the same age of his own daughters. But the family trusted, these girls trusted. That's one of the downsides to this. And that's why, again, it is important. Yes, if we're going to change and make a stronger community, neighborhood, and everything, you need people at the top who are dependable, trustworthy, who are genuine, who are authentic. That's why Jesus took the time out with his apostles. And he washed their feet and said, look, if you want to be first, you got to first be a servant. Because he wanted them to know that you have to walk that road, because people who are going to depend on you are going to be vulnerable. They're going to trust you. And if you're not strong enough and healthy enough, then you can use and easily abuse them. And we see this all the time. So I think it's important for us to understand how it is that we have to begin to help people to begin to see themselves, to understand and be careful enough to help them, because you want to uproot. But you only not only to uproot, but you have to be able to plant. And a lot of our preachers are good on condemning people and criticizing people and using the pulpit to trash people and tell them what they can and cannot do and da 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 da. But they're not close enough to be able to help people to do the healing. It's not enough to point out people their errors, but it's to be able to sit with them so that you can help them and give them the support so they can begin to do the replacement, because that's a slower process, isn't it? It's a much slower process because it's a mirroring process where we mirror to each other. And I think that's where the real secret comes, as I think. I hope, Manette, I hope I did answer your question. I hope I haven't missed it. So let me read it again to make sure. Members who disrespect your children. I don't think you should ever, no child should ever be placed in a situation where they should be disrespected, because you're talking about damaging the psyche. And once that gets filed, it becomes a problem. Samantha says, it is possible that the person doesn't necessarily believe all men are a certain way. Perhaps she was just making a general statement in such the same way that we may say you're always or you never and so on. And that is also true. But Samantha, I want to say though that these statements have a way of shaping. They become a part of your personality. And once it becomes a part of your personality, trust gets eroded. And once that happens, because you see, one of the thing I learned about love, and in particular, I'm talking about agape love here. I'm not talking about philia, any of those. I'm talking primarily of agape love, is that it calls for determination and courage. Because the moment you begin to go down that path, it means that you must first become vulnerable. And I think Jesus dramatized that for us when he says, if a person asks you to go a mile, you go 2. If it asks you for a job, you get. So you become vulnerable. So to practice this agape love, it means you have to be strong yourself to be able, if someone hits you on one cheek, you be able to take the other instead of being vindictive. So that's kind of what that is about. It's about being able to be strong enough to be able to and to become vulnerable. So in order to practice this agape love, you must first be born again and be transformed, because you are going to make yourself vulnerable. That's what it is. You're going to be vulnerable. But you have to understand that. That is why the Bible again and again emphasizes that I am with you. You're never alone. Because once you understand that you're not alone, then feeling vulnerable, you understand that there's a backup system. But if you're not have that connection and you feel vulnerable, then you feel empty, you feel depleted. And that's when you're going to hit back, or you're going to run, hide, do whatever that you have to do. But there's always a defense mechanism for weakness. You know, I always say weakness always leads to wickedness. Ultimately, it does. You know, and you see it with Herod. Okay, I mean, he seemed to be a good man. He said, look, you know, ask me for something else, and next thing you know, he wound up giving John the Baptist's head. So weakness always lends itself to wickedness, and if you allow that to happen, it will transform itself into something that you don't want to experience. So let me make sure that Samantha says you're welcome. The story was powerful. Our silence is just as wrong. And good night, everyone. Okay, Samantha from Phoenix City, Alabama. It's great to have you in the house tonight. It's such a wonderful thing. Thank you, Dr. Davis. I just want, I just don't want this disrespect to be passed on. Yes, and I think that's what you have to do. You certainly have to protect your children, and it might be this is someone you may not want to invite back in your home unless taking long. I mean, you cannot allow children, because what happens is the child internalizes those kinds of abuse and disrespect. And it gets, you know, one of the sad things, you know, when you look at family system, when you look, especially when you talk about, you know, witnessing families who are being evicted from their homes, their furnitures are being thrown out in the street. You know, we never stop to think about the children. You know, think about a child understanding that their parents are not equal to what they perceive to be successful Americans, successful Vincentians. When they witness that their children, their parents, the refrigerator's thrown out, the beds are thrown out, they've been evicted, everything that they own is out on the street. Think about the children. What are their thoughts about that? How do they see their parents? And in their mind, that their parents are being diminished. And so they know, but the children also know that the parents also know that in society they are amount to nothing. And so when you put that together, and I think as a people, we have to be very careful. I think that's when you look at the picture that is dramatized for us in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 2, where it says that people sold whatever they had so that no one was ever in need. It was a community of love, a community of brotherhood, a community of fellowship, where people were able to come together, irrespective of their differences in terms of cultural differences, that they were able to come together, have a meal together, sold to make sure that everything was what God intended for them to be. But we've allowed the spirit of capitalism to continue to divide us by using power and money. And much of our behavior today is in fact shaped by money and power. You may not want to agree with that, but I'm telling you, it is. Money and power shape our behavior. Everything we do is about that. And for those of us who don't have the power and don't have the money, we find criminal ways to get it. And the others of us who don't have it, we may use drugs, crack, and cocaine in order to feel good. Or we may use whatever it is to feel good. But we are been programmed in this culture, in this, where we are this global culture, that what you need is money and if you have power. And I think our politicians demonstrated best. You put them in power and all of a sudden their children have become millionaires overnight, you know? And so the poor people, they know, well, my dad would never be prime minister. My dad would never be the president. So I'm doomed. So the only course that I have, two courses, is either I go sell drugs so I can get a BMW or Mercedes and whatever, get all the girls, or I pack a gun and I start, you know, taking my revenge out on people. I mean, that's where we are. And we don't want to talk about that. You know, we seem like for whatever reason, it's something that, but these are the hardcore things we need to talk about. How do we change ourselves? How do we create a community where people can begin to feel good about themselves, to respect themselves. And I'm saying that in order to do that, we have to model it to each other. Sister Graves says you can now legally report the person, and that is true, who are attacking you on social media and so on. Yes, of course, when I worked in the school system, we were very careful about the bullying that happens on the internet. And I've seen students got suspended. We've called the police in some instances because the situation was really horrible, where kids were being bullied. And so, yes, that does happen. This is considerably a criminal behavior issue when you are attacking others. And we see it all the time. We're using the social media in order to attack others. So bullying, I think it's even more devastating on the internet, the way, especially among our young kids. And that's why I think parents ought to be not only discipline your child, but I think monitoring is something that I think that parents sometimes become too engaged and too busy in order to provide the monitoring that is necessary so that they can ensure that their children are being socialized in a healthy community that reflect their values and the way that they want their children to go. But a lot of our families sometimes are bankrupt themselves. They don't have the values. So if you don't have the values, what are you going to give to your children? And many of our children are being socialized in family systems that don't have the value system, because we evolving as a people. And I think this, once upon a time, we used to be really campaigning against biological evolution, Darwinism, and it was a big deal. But the cultural evolution, the social cultural evolution that's happening, we're practically silent on it. As a matter of fact, most of the churches are now adapting to it. And it's becoming a part of who we are. And so that is part of the scary part of it that I see that is certainly happening in our society here today. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing any of the more of the comments here. Nadine says, I think you should teach your child to call the police when they attack. So Nadine is giving my dear friend there in the Philippines, and Nadine is giving you should call the police. And that's why, but I don't know what the laws are there in the Philippines, but I'm hoping that they have laws where I'm thinking that they would be, because they're part of the United Nations and everything else. And if you read the United Nations Charter, it talks a lot about that, about protecting our children and so on. So that's a good recommendation. And I certainly want to thank you for giving that. Behavior, we give attention to reinforcement. Samantha says this behavior is the behavior we will see more of. Totally ignoring the negative behavior will significantly reduce the behavior. And that's where Skinner and those guys, were in the terms of their contribution, where they said, look, let's not worry about what people are thinking. It's not measurable. Let's focus on the behavior, because if we focus on the behavior with reinforcement, reward the good behavior, you punish the bad behavior. And for American psychology, for many years, was really the behaviorists were the guys who were driving. Skinner and those guys were the guys who were driving psychology until later on, when we start talking about cognitive psychology and medication and the way people are thinking and stuff like that. So it changed the landscape in American psychology, and I would suspect globally now, that's where people are. But in the old, in terms of the behaviorists, and I think when you look at what Jesus said, look, you measure by what the behavior. James also talks about that. Faith without works is dead. So I think what Samantha is saying, and I hope I have misquoted you, she's saying that if you reinforce bad behavior, that's what you're going to have. If you're able to recognize bad behavior, draw away from it, and you're able to reward the good behavior, then the outcome is a lot better. And I think that we have to begin to combine. But I think a lot of our churches and a lot of our young preachers in particular, I think, are more gravitating towards the cognitive behavioral approach the way you're thinking. I'm smarter than you are. I can tell you what you're thinking before you're thinking it. But I think Jesus' old-fashioned model is let's just not be overly judgmental. Let's just look at the behavior. A mango tree wouldn't bring corn. A certain tree would bring certain things, fruits. You look for that. That's what you look for. But there might be certain flowers and it looks beautiful, but it doesn't do anything. So I think we have to be very careful and begin to look at the behavior, the landscape, the trajectory in terms of where we're going as a people, in terms of the kinds of behaviors. But of course, I don't want to contradict myself, because I want to say to us that what's driving the bad behaviors are the way we are thinking. So I think the cognitive behavioral approach, I think, is still good. So I don't want to, make you think that I'm thinking one way. I'm just saying, yes, the thinking drives the behavior. But I'm saying to you that ultimately what matters is the thinking. You need time to cultivate the behavior, because ultimately that's what you judge. And that's a habit forming, and it takes a lot more practice in order to become. It's like learning to drive, learning to do a bicycle. So, and that's why in Christianity, we're told that we all begin as children, and as children, we grow and we become stronger and we become mature. The Bible talks about maturity all the time. It's quite unfortunate. We sometimes move people from childhood into adult because of their money, because of their color. And I see it all the time. And sometimes it saddens me when people do that. When people think by virtue of a person's color, how much money they have, they must be better off. Somehow they are superior because you may have a darker color, or you don't have any money, whatever you do. You're trash, you're garbage, you're an idiot, you're dunce, you're foolish. And people do. I see it all the time. I live, so I said to someone recently, I know when to duck. I know when to be silent, because ultimately I know who I am and where I am, and I know I got to pay my bills. So I'm not going to fight with everybody because they don't like me. I'm just going to just know how to duck when I need to duck and how to move on. But we have to understand that the behavior is coming from somewhere. And if we want to change the behavior, you got to change the way people are in fact thinking. So I really want to thank you all for all the comments. And we didn't get very far in some of the things that I really wanted to say. And some of the things that I really wanted to say was I didn't get to say, but I wanted to talk, maybe next time I'll talk about that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Gestalt therapy. That is, and the reason that I wanted to talk about that, because it's a therapy, it's a theory that really says what really matter is what a person is thinking in the here and now. And that's where the change is concerned. It's not about intellectualizing and rationalizing and justifying, but rather it's about what is happening now. And if we can begin to focus on what's happening now, what are you feeling now? What's generating this now? And get people, that's why the Bible says today is a day of salvation. So we have to be aware. If today is a day of salvation, we must know where we are standing right now. And Paul puts it well that we are if you've been justified, you're standing in grace. And I think that we need to begin to reflect on that. How well am I standing on grace? Am I like standing in grace with a banana peel, with one feet already lift off, and going for a flight? How firm are you rooted in the grace of God? And ultimately, each of us know tonight, deep in our hearts, where we are, what's driving us, how we feel, what's our challenges, what are our vulnerabilities, and what are our strengths. And all I'm saying to us is that we can make today, now, a time of success, that the full and abundant life, you can begin to experience it now because Christ is with us. And of course, you have to surrender to him. And as it mentioned, that you must be born again. And these are just simple things that you and I need to really begin to understand. So before we close, we only have about 5 minutes to go. I just want to be sure that we don't have any comments that I'm missing. My dear sister, thank you for being here with us here tonight. It's sort of privilege to see you here as well. Sister Graves, it's a privilege to have you. Nadine, it's a privilege to have you. And of course, Kamal is sitting in the studio. Sister Linda, it's a privilege to have you with us as well. Nervis, it's a pleasure to have you. Sonia, it's a privilege to have you listening. I'm not sure if you understand any of this English, but hope you do. But it's a privilege to have all of you present here tonight, and we certainly will continue our discussion here tonight. I didn't get much covered, but certainly I hope that the little that we did cover, that it's helpful for you to understand that today is a day of salvation, and we need to begin to, if we want to have an impact, it's not about what the White House can do. It's not about what Albany can do, the governors can do. It's really about what you can do in your collaboration with Christ, in your home, with your family and your grandchildren, and begin to move forward in a very positive and healthy way. So Kamal, it's been a privilege. Well, I have 4 minutes. I'm not going to give away my 4 minutes yet. Hold on.
I was just wondering, how come he's running off so early?
No, because I was reading the wrong clock here. So, because I was looking at 6:10, but actually 6:10 on the computer is the date.
Yeah, you got 3 more minutes.
Yeah, I have 3. Yeah, you know me. If you give me 3, I'll take 10. So, but yeah. So I wanted to. Let me see where I am. Yeah, I wanted to talk a lot about tonight about much of what we're experiencing really has to do with your belief system, how you experience yourself as a male, how you experience yourself as a female, and all of the baggages that go with that. I'm saying tonight you can flush all of that out. And that is why Joel talks about that in the last days he will pour his spirit. And if you look at that metaphor, if you look at that language, the pouring of the Holy Spirit into a container, you have to empty the container. If you want to have all of it, you have to empty the container. It only makes sense. I remember as a kid growing up, I used to have to go to the standpipe. I don't just say have the standpipe in St. Vincent, but in the old days, we didn't have water in the house. You have to go to a standpipe with a bucket, and you get your water. And then you go home, and sometimes by the time you get home, half the water is already gone. And so then you fall and everything is gone. You got to go back to the standpipe and start all over again. But the point is, the bucket has to be emptied first. Not only the bucket has to be emptied, you want to make sure it's clean first, right? Because you were talking about getting clean drinking water. So you got to make sure the bucket is clean. And then you have to fill the bucket. And so when he says that Joel says God will pour his spirit, that means that you have to be cleansed first. And that's why Jesus said to Nicodemus, he must be born again. There has to be an emptying so that he can now take up his position in your life. And that's where we are today. That if you are a genuine child of God, you have that spirit within you, collaborating with your spirit. And that's what gives you a sense of joy. And that is why you can say, I have the full, I'm experiencing. For me, the full and abundant life is a reality. And then you can say how sweet it is tonight to be a child of God. And that is because I know I'm experiencing the presence of God through the Holy Spirit and his truth in my life. And I'm extremely grateful for that. So, and I want to say there's another program that comes on Tuesday night, which is the Scriptural Search. We certainly want to, and it's right here on this WFM station, Scriptural Search, every Tuesday night. I think it's at 6 o'clock or 7 p.m., one of those. And then in August the 2nd to the 5th, we're going to have the Caribbean Lectureship, which is going to be hosted in St. Lucia. So again, I want to invite those of you in St. Vincent listening that you should be planning to go to St. Lucia for the Caribbean Lectureship, which is August the 2nd to the 5th. I hope that you guys are planning and ready to go there. And for those of you in the U.S., that would be a great time for you to have some real Bible food and enjoy the Caribbean lectureship. I think there's a women's program too that they'll be having. So for the ladies, that will be a great opportunity for you to hang out with other Christian ladies in the Caribbean and really be fed and to enjoy all of that wonderful time, August the 2nd to August the 5th, the Caribbean lectureship. And of course, next Tuesday night on WeFM right here, you can tune into the Scriptural Search for those of you in St. Vincent. And then you have also Brother Elton, who does the national radio station. He does a weekly devotion there on the national station as well in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So it's certainly a privilege to have all of you. It's been a blessing. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And we shall see you all next week, same time, same place again. God bless and see you all sometime. Kamal, thank you so much.
You are so welcome, Dr. Davis, and thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure having you here on Wednesday evening. And I'm sure the folks do appreciate, even though some may not call or many may not call, I'm sure that they're just there listening. And I mean, I can tell you this much: when I leave the radio station at nights, I wish there was like another talk program that I could just listen to while driving going home. But I won't call. I just listen.
You just listen. Okay.
But anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Davis. It's always a pleasure, like I said, having you each and every Wednesday. And folks, you've been listening to the Full and Abundant Life Radio program hosted by Dr. Claudia Davis. This program comes your way each and every Wednesday from 9 until 10. God's willing, do join him again next Wednesday for another Full and Abundant Life Radio program right here on WeFM. Thank you very much. It is now 2 minutes after 10 o'clock, and it's also time for me